A young woman is sold at auction, bleeding after giving birth. A poor farmer buys her and shocks everyone. Have you ever heard of a woman being put on a public auction block like she was an object, right after living through the most painful moment of her life? Well, I'm telling you, it happened in a small town in the rural South, back in a time when injustice and cruelty left scars on entire families. The story I'm about to tell you is so surprising that it will stir your emotions from beginning to end. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this one. Stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on life. On that sweltering day, with the sun baking the ground, the community of Harmony Creek gathered in front of the old barn where the auctions were always held. But this time, it wasn't just old tools or livestock being offered. There was something different, something that shocked even the most hardened folks in that small town. A young woman with a delicate face and a lost look stood there for all to see, as if she were just another piece of property. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some whispered, "This can't be happening," while others scoffed, "Are they really going to sell a woman like this?" Still others just laughed, as if they were watching a cruel show. And it was in this scene of shock and outrage that a man emerged from the crowd. A young farmer with a strong body and hands calloused from hard work. His name was Adam. He wasn't rich. He had no possessions other than his small farm and a tired old horse. But he had something that few others there did: courage and compassion. The fate of that young woman, whose name was Hannah, seemed sealed in that instant. But what no one knew was that this meeting would change both their lives forever, and the final revelation would leave the entire town stunned. I need you to imagine with me that old barn with its rough plank walls, a dirt floor, dust hanging in the air, and a single lantern swinging from the main hook. The banjo playing at the general store next door suddenly went silent, as if even the music was ashamed of what was about to happen. The auctioneer, a man known as Mr. Graves, stepped onto a rotting crate, raised his little hammer, and shouted in that voice that could cut right through you. "Attention, folks, a unique and different lot, a one of a kind." A buzz grew in the crowd. I saw women covering their mouths, men adjusting their hats, and a few curious onlookers climbing up on the fence posts. Right there in front of everyone was Hannah, so young, trying to cover herself with a light-colored shawl. Her eyes darted around as if searching for a door that wasn't there. I won't detail the pain she had endured just hours earlier. You only had to look at her face to feel the weight of a difficult night. I remember thinking, my God, a person isn't a commodity. Mr. Graves impatiently tapped his hammer in the air. "Who'll start the bidding? Who'll make the first offer? She's a healthy young woman, a good worker, obedient. Come on, folks." A woman in the back whispered to her friend, "This is a sin, Azalea. This is just wrong." And her friend replied, "Hush, sin is not having a thing to eat. People do all sorts of things." In the front row, a man in a crisp suit, smelling of expensive cigars and with a cold stare crossed his legs. It was Colonel Gideon Hayes, who owned half the land in the county. He smiled slyly like a man watching a game he'd already won. "I'll open the bidding," he said without getting up. "Name your price, Colonel," Mr. Graves replied, stroking his mustache. "A price none of these poor fellas can match." A silence fell like a stone. Some men chuckled, others swallowed hard. Hannah clutched the shawl tighter against her chest, and I saw her fingers trembling, not just from fear, but from the shock of realizing she was completely at the world's mercy. "This ain't right, folks," a scrawny man in worn sandals dared to say. "You don't sell a person." Mr. Graves shot back, trying to maintain order. "Quiet, Roy. This is business. If you're not buying, don't interfere." I felt the air grow thick. Father Michael, who always came to the market to bless the stalls, appeared at the door. For a moment, it seemed like he was going to intervene, but he just stood there, his hands hidden in his robes, looking on without a word. A lot of good people there were afraid of Colonel Hayes. Fear and dependence. Hannah took a deep breath and in a thin voice asked Mr. Graves, "Can you at least let me have a drink of water?" "Later, girl," he cut her off, checking his pocket watch. "First, let's take care of what matters." That phrase echoed in my mind. What matters? As if her dignity was just a minor detail. I moved closer to the ring and saw that Hannah was trying to keep what little pride she had left. Her back straight, her chin firm, her small voice insisting, "I'm not a thing." "Around here, everyone is someone's thing," a cynical man behind me said. Colonel Hayes got up, brushed the dust off his trousers, and walked slowly as if savoring his own importance. He stopped 2 steps from Hannah. "Look at this," he said. "A girl with bright eyes, useful for the house." Hannah stared at him with a point of courage that surprised me. "I won't serve in any man's house." He laughed. "Life doesn't ask you what you want, girl. It tells you." 2 women in the crowd began to pray under their breath, their fingers moving over rosary beads. A man selling hot cornbread stopped his call. Even the children playing outside fell silent, as if the shame had seeped through the walls. Mr. Graves raised his hammer again. "Colonel, you confirm your bid?" "I confirm," he said, "and no one better interfere." I swear to you, for a second it seemed like there was no way out. The whole town looked down. You can feel it when injustice is about to win again, and it gives you a weariness that weighs on your shoulders. Hannah bit her lip to keep from crying, and I saw that she wanted to just disappear, to turn into wind, into dust, into anything. It was then that, from the corner of the barn, we heard the sound of firm footsteps on the dirt floor. These weren't the steps of someone running, but of someone who had made up their mind. Heads turned. A tall man whose body bore the mark of hard labor walked through the crowd. His rolled-up sleeves showed strong arms, and his eyes, though tired, held a fire that I didn't see in anyone else there. "That's enough," he said, without raising his voice. Mr. Graves frowned. "Sir, are you intending to interrupt the auction?" "I intend to interrupt a disgrace," he replied. The colonel's smile tightened, as if he found it amusing that an ant would dare to bite his shoe. "Who are you, boy?" "Adam, from Dry Creek Farm." "And do you have what it takes to outbid me?" the colonel challenged. Adam looked at Hannah first, and only then replied to the colonel. "I have enough." The crowd shifted, half curious, half fearful. Mr. Graves tried to regain control. "Very well, we have a bidding war. Who'll top the colonel's offer?" The air was thick with suspense, like a string about to snap. I felt that in that very minute the story would change course, but no one knew how. Hannah, still not understanding, asked Adam in a whisper, "Why are you doing this, sir?" He took a breath as if choosing his words. "Because someone has to, and because some things you don't bargain with." Colonel Hayes stroked his chin, a hint of irony in his eyes. "Then show me what you've got." I held my breath, and so did the crowd. And it was at that exact point, with the hammer suspended and Hannah's fate hanging in the air, that the whole market went still. What Adam offered next was something no one there could have imagined, and that's what started to turn the story on its head, step by step, all the way to the final shock that I still have to reveal to you. I remember the exact moment he showed up, cutting through the dust of the barn as if his very presence cleared a path. Adam, 28 years old, hat pulled low, sleeves rolled up, with the strong arms of a man who'd known hard work since he was a boy. He was built solid, but with a simple manner that spoke of a hard life. Dirt on his work boots, a sweat stain on his shirt. He wasn't a man of big words, he was a man of action. And it was with that quiet resolve that he walked through the crowd while everyone held their breath, afraid of Colonel Hayes. In the country, you recognize a working man by his posture. Firm shoulders, a direct gaze, a breath that doesn't hurry. Adam stopped near the auction block, his brown horse, Ranger, tied to a fence post. That horse, I'm telling you, was more than just a work animal. It was a traveling companion, a friend from sunup to sundown. A lot of people there knew that for a simple man, giving up a horse is like giving up a piece of your own life. "You plan on stopping this deal, boy?" the auctioneer, Mr. Graves, asked with the impatience of a man who already had a sure buyer. Adam raised his head without flinching. "I plan on stopping an injustice." The murmur grew. Some people laughed. Others looked away in pity. Father Michael took a step closer, his hand on his chin, as if praying silently. Nearby, the banjo player at the general store tried to start a tune, but the music died on the first note. That barn, with its old planks and the smell of damp wood, seemed to breathe along with the people. Hannah, still and quiet, kept the shawl around her shoulders and didn't look at anyone for a moment. Then she found her courage and faced the stranger. "Sir, why did you come here?" Adam didn't turn to the curious onlookers. He answered, looking straight at her, "Because someone has to come." Colonel Hayes smirked, adjusting the brim of his fine hat. "Does this someone have money?" Adam ran his thumb across his pocket, feeling the thin fabric of his pants as if confirming what he had and what he didn't. I saw in the gesture the honesty of a man who counts every coin to make it to the next day. "I have what's mine," he said calmly, "and what's worth something in." The crowd bit back a sound. I, who was narrating all this inside my head, remembered what people said about Adam. He was left alone very young. He inherited a small patch of land by Dry Creek. He paid his debts with small harvests and lived off what he grew with his own hands. In his simple house, there was a small shrine inherited from his mother and a wooden bed that creaked in the wind. His only companions were routine and his brown horse, Ranger. No luxury, no surplus, but he had a respect that you couldn't buy, the respect of a man who keeps his word. "Ma'am," he said, now in a low voice so only she could hear, "no one should have to go through this." Hannah squeezed the ends of her shawl, not knowing whether to be grateful or to fear things getting worse. "If you try this, they'll turn against you." "I already live against the wind," Adam replied, "and I haven't fallen yet." The colonel stomped his boot on the dirt floor, impatient. "Let's cut the romance. Just tell me what you're offering, boy." Adam took a deep breath, looked at Ranger again, and I understood. He was saying goodbye in his mind. The horse turned its ear as if it understood too. It was a second that lasted an eternity. And then Adam stepped forward, firm as the noonday sun, to announce what he would put on the table. It was something none of us there expected, and it would begin to change the fortunes of Hannah, of him, and without the colonel knowing it, of the entire town. The silence was so heavy you could hear the creak of the barn planks, as if even the wood was protesting against what was happening. Adam took a deep breath, adjusted his hat, and raised his voice with a new firmness. "I'll offer my horse." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. It was disbelief, surprise, even outrage. Ranger, that brown horse everyone knew, a road companion, a trusted animal, was Adam's greatest wealth. More than the few coins in his pocket, more than his simple home itself. He was offering a piece of himself. Mr. Graves' eyes widened as he tried to keep his auctioneer's composure. "A horse? Are you serious, Adam?" "As serious as the sun rising every day," he answered without a hint of hesitation. Colonel Hayes laughed out loud, a sneering, mocking sound, his chest puffed out. "That horse can barely pull a plow. You want to trade a broken-down animal for a woman? You're a fool." But his laughter didn't spread like it had before. Some of the silent crowd began to look at the scene differently. Adam's courage was planting something new in their hearts. Hannah, still clutching her shawl, looked up at him. It was as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her voice came out trembling, a mere whisper. "You'll give up the thing you value most?" Adam turned to her for a moment, his gaze steady. "Better to lose a horse than to let someone lose their dignity." The words echoed through the barn. Even those who had mocked him fell silent. Father Michael ran his hand over his rosary and lowered his head, as if silently blessing that decision. Mr. Graves, realizing the situation was getting out of his control, stroked his beard and tried to get back to business. "All right, the young man is offering a horse and some coins. Who'll top that?" The colonel slapped his hand on the table, irritated. "This is an insult. I offered real money, and you're going to consider a bony horse?" Adam didn't flinch. "You have plenty of money, sir, but courage, you don't." The comment sparked a few murmurs. Some men smiled on the side, others tried to hide it, but everyone knew the colonel didn't like to be challenged. Gideon Hayes narrowed his eyes, his breathing heavy, but he didn't respond. From the back of the crowd, an old woman whispered, "May God protect that boy, because he's messing with dangerous people." Mr. Graves's hammer still trembled in his hand, indecisive. He looked at the colonel, then at Adam, and finally at the young woman, who remained steady on the block. The auctioneer had never been a man to refuse profit, but at that moment what he saw was more than a business deal. It was a dispute between values, honor versus power. So be it, Mr. Graves said, bringing the hammer down with a solid thud. Sold! The sound echoed loudly, and the town never forgot that moment. The people whispered, some clapped timidly, others looked at the ground, fearful of the Curneo. Adam walked to the auction block. Hannah, surprised, hesitated. He held out his arms and said softly, "Let's go home." She, with tears held back, could only reply, "I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You just need to start over." And so, carrying the girl in his arms, with the eyes of the entire market following him, Adam walked away. Behind him, Colonel Hayes, red with rage, swore vengeance in silence. Wow. And that's how a journey of pain, courage, and love began, marked by the choice of a simple man who stood up against an entire system. What seemed impossible at that moment was only the first step of a much bigger struggle that was yet to come. The sound of the hammer was still echoing when Adam Stadium stepped down from the block, and without waiting for anyone to help, he held out his arms for Hannah. She hesitated, looked at the crowd, then at Colonel Hayes, who was grinding his teeth in anger, and finally let herself be taken. Her body was light as a feather, but heavy with so much pain. Adam carried her as if he were carrying an entire lifetime, and in that instant, that's exactly what he was doing. The crowd parted. No one dared to stop them, but the whispers multiplied. "That boy doesn't know who he messed with," a man with a low hat murmured. "He's going to pay for this," another replied. From the back, the furious Colonel Hayes let out a cry full of hatred. "This isn't over, Adam. You'll regret this yet." Adam stopped for a moment, turned his head, and replied in a firm tone with shouting, "The one who regrets is the one who has no courage. I just did what was right." And he kept walking, not giving them another thought. Outside, the sun was still scorching. Ranger, the horse already surrendered as part of the deal, neighed, tied to the post. Adam looked at the animal with a pang in his chest. It was like saying goodbye to a friend. Hannah noticed and said softly, "I'm so sorry, you gave him up because of me." Adam sighed, quickening his pace. "A horse? We can find another one. But a good person who deserves respect, we don't let them be lost." He walked on, each step kicking up dust as the eyes of the crowd fell behind them. Hannah, though weak, tried to hold back her tears. She looked at him and whispered, "I don't understand why you did this." "Because if it were me," he replied, "I would have wanted someone to do the same." The two of them moved away from the barn, passing through the market square. The stalls of corn and candy were silent, as if even the vendors didn't know whether to sell or just watch that moment. Children stopped playing, women held rosaries to their chests, and men crossed their arms, lost in thought. It wasn't common to see someone stand up to the colonel and walk away on their own 2 feet. When they reached the edge of the road, Adam stopped, adjusted Hannah in his arms, and asked, "Can you walk?" She shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but I promise I'll try." "You don't need to promise anything," he said. "You just need to rest and move forward." They walked away from the town. Behind them, Colonel Hayes was still fuming, swearing revenge. But at that moment, neither Hannah nor Adam cared about what the powerful man was saying. They just wanted distance from the mockery and the pain they had left behind. In the dust of that road, a new story was beginning. A story marked by suffering, yes, but also by the courage of a simple man who chose a young woman's dignity above all else. And that's precisely why every detail from here on will hold you even more tightly. Because what seemed like a simple act of compassion was actually the beginning of a struggle against forces much greater than they could have imagined. If this story has moved you so far, please hit the like button so that more people can discover this narrative of courage and injustice. It helps a lot to keep us bringing you powerful stories like this one. The dirt road seemed endless. The sun was no longer scorching as before, and the late afternoon breeze was beginning to blow cooler. Adam walked steadily, and Hannah, leaning on his arm, tried to keep up, even though with every step her body showed its exhaustion. The two walked in silence until they reached the small house of clay and wood that Adam called home. It was simple, with old shingles and a worn-out porch, but it had what mattered most, a safe haven. When they entered, Hannah looked around and took a deep breath. There was no luxury at all, just a wooden table marked by time, 2 chairs, a simple bed in a corner, in a small shrine with a statue of the Virgin Mary lit by a candle. Even so, for her, that place seemed more dignified than any luxurious mansion in town. Adam helped her sit down and brought her a glass of fresh water from the clay jug. "Here, ma'am, this will do you good." She drank slowly as if each sip washed away a piece of her pain. After a while, Hannah lowered her eyes, fiddling with the shawl that still covered her shoulders, and murmured, you don't know where I came from." Adam sat across from her, resting his elbows on his knees, looking at her calmly. "Tell me if you want to. I only know that no one deserves what they did to you." The tears she had held back until then slid silently down her face. "I had a family, but when they found out I was expecting a child, they turned their backs on me. They said I had dishonored their name. I begged for help, but they didn't listen." Adam clenched his fists in silence. "They threw me out of the house. They said they didn't want to carry shame inside their walls. And when the man who promised to marry me found out about the baby," her voice cracked and she swallowed hard, "he just disappeared. Never wanted to see me again." Adam looked up, outraged. "That's not a real man who does that." Hannah took a deep breath, trying to continue. "I was left alone, and when the time came, I had no one by my side. After they handed me over as if I were a dead weight, as if I wasn't even a person." Silence fell heavily in the room. The afternoon wind made the windows creak, as if even the house felt her pain. Adam ran a hand over his face, trying to find words, but all he could say was, "You should never have had to go through that. Never." Hannah wiped the tears with her own hands and added in a whisper, "The baby. He didn't make it. They took him away before I could even hold him." The confession filled the space with an almost palpable sadness. Adam stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the horizon, trying to swallow his outrage. Then he came back and spoke in a firm voice. "I can't change what already happened, but from now on, as long as I can, you'll never be alone again." Hannah lifted her tear-filled eyes to him, and for the first time she felt a spark of hope in the midst of the darkness that surrounded her. This simple man, with his quiet voice and calloused hands, seemed to carry within him a strength capable of supporting not just his own life, but hers as well. And so, on that silent afternoon, Hannah began to share the weight of her past with someone who was willing to carry it with her. The suffering was still immense, but for the first time, it was no longer a solitary burden. That night, the moon lit Adam's small house with its silvery light. Hannah, lying on the simple bed, couldn't sleep. The wind passed through the cracks in the window and brought with it memories that insisted on returning. Adam, noticing her distant gaze, pulled a chair over and sat down beside her. "You don't have to force sleep, ma'am. Sometimes it's better to talk than to hold it all in," he said in his calm voice. Hannah sighed deeply and after a few seconds of silence, began to tell him what hurt the most. "I just wanted to hold my son, at least once," her voice trembled. "When he was born, I was so weak. I heard him cry, but it lasted so little. And then they just told me he didn't make it. They took him away in a hurry. They didn't even let me see him." Tears flowed slowly, and she covered her face with her hands. Adam took a deep breath, feeling her pain as if it were his own. He was silent for a few moments, letting her say everything she needed to know. They buried him in a poor corner of the cemetery, with no name, nothing, Hannah continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I think no one will ever remember him." Adam got up from the chair, walked to the small shrine and lit another candle. He came back, knelt down in front of her, and spoke with a firm voice but with teary eyes. "Well, I'll remember. From today on, he's not just yours, he's mine too. As long as I live, I'll pray for that child as if he were my own flesh and blood." Hannah stared at him, surprised, as if she hadn't expected anyone to share this pain with her. A sob escaped, but also a sigh of relief, like someone finding shelter in the middle of a storm. "You don't owe me anything, Adam. You don't have to carry this cross with me," she said, trying to hold back the tears. He shook his head firmly. "It's not a debt, it's a choice. Anyone who has known loneliness knows that no one should have to go through it alone." At that moment, Hannah allowed herself to find rest in the arms of that man who, even without blood ties, was offering to share her pain. And it was in that silent gesture that a bond began to form, stronger than any contract, purer than any promise. The moonlight continued to illuminate the simple house, and although the loss was irreparable, Hannah no longer felt that she was carrying the memory alone. There was someone willing to hold it with her, to pray with her, to remember with her. Now I want to know from you who are following this story. If you were in her place, would you have the courage to open your heart to someone and share such a deep pain? Or would you keep it all in silence? Leave your answer in the comments. The next morning, the first crow of the rooster came with a fresh dawn wind. Adam's house smelled of coffee brewed in a cloth filter and warm cornbread. I saw him get up earlier than usual, light the wood stove, and let a chicken stew simmer slowly with a handful of cilantro on top, in the simple country way. Also, Hannah would have strength. "You'll eat when you feel like it," he said, stirring the pot. "The rest I'll leave on the fire to stay warm." Hannah nodded with a shy look. Her voice was still quiet. "Thank you. It's been a long time since anyone cooked with me in mine." Adam pulled out a chair for her, brought her a bowl, and blew on the steam before handing it to her, all with the care of someone who is afraid of breaking a fragile glass. A comfortable silence settled at that table marked by years of use, the kind of silence that gives your heart a rest. After lunch, he spread a cloth on the porch and separated some herbs he had stored on a drying rack: chamomile, lemon balm, a bunch of feverfew. "My mother taught me," he told her, almost as a secret. "Tea doesn't cure everything, but it helps you get through the day." "Your mother must have been a good woman," Hannah said. "She was, and she was stubborn too. Taught me to respect other people's pace. Everyone has their own time." To give Hannah privacy, Adam improvised a curtain out of a piece of calico, dividing the room in two. He tacked the fabric up with care, measuring with his fingers, hammering slowly so as not to startle her. He also washed bed sheets in the creek, scrubbing with a bar of soap until the suds ran clear, and hung them to dry on a wire clothesline in the sun. I'm telling you, that simple scene was a portrait of care. In the late afternoon, he brought her a used dress from an old box, a piece of his mother's, and asked respectfully, "If you don't mind, you can use this until we can get you another one." Hannah held the fabric as if she were receiving a hug. "I'll take good care of it, I promise." The days found a rhythm. In the morning, Adam would go tend his small garden, cassava, black-eyed peas, a patch of cilantro, and would come home earlier than usual. He divided his work so he could be nearby in case Hannah needed help. Slowly, she regained her strength and her spirit. She swept the floor, wiped down the table, changed the water in the clay pot, and before she knew it, she was humming an old tune that reminded her of childhood. "If you get tired, stop," he would always say. "No one here has anything to prove." "I want to feel alive again," she replied with a timid smile. One night, the lamplight made a circle of yellow light on the wall. Hannah took a simple necklace from her shawl with a dented pendant, marked with a monogram that no one would recognize at first glance. She placed it inside the small shrine next to the candle. Adam noticed, but didn't ask. He had learned from his mother that some answers come on their own, in their own time. When it rained lightly, he would patch the roof so the water wouldn't drip into her room. When the sun got too hot, he would spread a mat in the shade of the big oak tree and leave a fresh jug of water nearby. And when the memories came back heavy, and they did, as all pain that is still learning to pass does, he would sit on the doorstep, not saying much, just being there. "Presence is medicine too, Adam," she called out one late afternoon, her voice firm for the first time. "I don't know how to thank you for how you're treating me." "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "Just don't give up on yourself. The rest, we'll face it however we can." A week later, Hannah asked to go down to the creek. She wanted to wash her own shawl. Adam went with her, without getting in the way of the strength she was recovering. He sat on a rock and watched the water run. "That's how life is," he said, thinking out loud. "It washes away what isn't good and leaves the rock smoother." Hannah wrung out the cloth and smiled. "Maybe I'll get smooth too, without so many cuts on the inside." "You will," he guaranteed. "The smoothest rock is the one that shines the most in the sun." Little by little, care became routine, and routine became security. Hannah started sleeping better, eating with an appetite, and looking at her reflection in the cracked mirror without fear. Adam, for his part, missed his horse, Ranger, like you miss a brother, but he didn't let the sadness cast a shadow over the house. In place of silence, he brought home an old radio borrowed from a neighbor, and on Saturday nights, he would let a distant banjo tune drift in through the window. Music helps us remember that the world hasn't ended, he commented, and that we can still start over, Hannah finished. In that small patch of land by Dry Creek, two wounded lives learned a simple way to heal, with respect, with time, and with small gestures. The suffering still lived there, it's true, but now it shared the space with something new that I don't dare just call hope. It was more than that. It was the beginning of a pure feeling that didn't need big words to exist. But the outside world doesn't like it when dignity is reborn where they expected ruin. And it was just when Hannah found the courage to leave the house and take her first steps back into town that the poison of gossip began to drip. And that's where our story takes another turn. The next week, when the sun was still rising behind the big oak tree, Hannah asked Adam to let her go to town. She wanted to buy thread and needles to mend the dress she had inherited from his mother, and most of all, to prove to herself that she could walk outside the walls of the house. Adam thought for a moment, gauged the wind, and nodded. "We'll go slow. If you get tired, we'll rest." "I can do it," she said, trying to convince her own heart more than him. Dressed in the flowered fabric, her hair in a simple bun, Hannah crossed the yard with a short but steady stride. The two of them took the dirt road, and the sound of dry leaves under their boots seemed to announce that a new strength was emerging. When they reached the first street of Harmony Creek, people's doors were already open. Stalls of peanut brittle, crates of tomatoes, the smell of roasting coffee. And along with the good smells, there was another one. Gossip. At the counter of Mr. Fisher's general store, the conversation died as soon as they walked in. Two women exchanged looks. A man in the back with a newspaper open held the paper to his face as if he wanted to hide behind the printed words. Hannah pretended not to notice. "Good morning," she said politely. "Do you have thread and needles?" Mr. Fisher scratched his neck, his eyes sliding to Adam and then back to her. Got some, but today the register is a mess." "I'll pay now," Hannah replied, opening her hand with the coins Adam had given her. The shopkeeper shifted his weight and cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you better look in another store." Adam frowned without raising his voice. "Why?" Mr. Fisher shrugged as if apologizing without saying the word. "A man has his place in this town, Adam. You know that. And I depend on the big customers." Hannah slowly collected the coins, as if she were also gathering up a piece of her pride. "Let's go," she said, wanting to leave before her face betrayed her hurt. They went to Mrs. Azalea's dry goods store. At the door, two young women whispered without trying to hide it. "It's that one, the one he bought. They say it happened right in the middle of the market." Hannah pretended not to hear. Cold, sharp words clung to her from the inside like thorns. Ms. Azalea, who had a reputation for being fair, hesitated, looking at Adam, at the street, at the ceiling, as if seeking courage in the rafters. Then she did what her heart told her. "Thread and needles, I have them." She placed the small packet on the counter and, to Hannah's surprise, also pushed another spool towards her. "This one's a bonus." Hannah's eyes shone with a small, contained light. "Thank you, truly." Mrs. Azalea just shrugged. "A woman needs tools to mend her own life, my dear." But the town, wounded by Colonel Hayes's pride, wasn't going to make things easy. On their way out, they crossed paths with Father Michael, who squeezed Hannah's hands with a warmth that didn't fit in a sermon. "Daughter, keep your head up." "I'm trying, Father," she replied. Before the priest could finish his blessing, two of the colonel's henchmen, Billy Ray and Zeke, were waiting on the corner. Their posture wasn't of attack, but of a warning. "Nice day, isn't it, Adam?" Billy Ray said with a crooked smile. "The sun rises for everyone," Adam replied without backing down. Zeke brushed the dust from his hat and said with a sneer, "Just don't get too comfortable. Small towns have long memories." Hannah clutched Adam's arm. He didn't retreat, but he didn't advance either. He knew how to gauge a fight. "Come on, Hannah. We've got better things to do than to talk to bad wind." At the general store, the scene repeated itself. Mr. Osborne pretended he had no flour, and he had sacks and sacks of it. At the water pump, two women stopped washing clothes just to watch Hannah pass. as if they were watching a parade of shame that wasn't theirs, but that they wanted to be a part of. And on the park bench where the men read news from the city, the biggest headline of all was the gossip. "Colonel Hayes says that woman brought bad luck," someone whispered. "And bad luck spreads," another superstitious man replied. Hannah took a steady breath and asked Adam to let her sit for a moment in the shade of a big tree. "I'll be okay," she said quietly. "Just give me a minute." Adam knelt down in front of her, his hand open, not touching her, but offering support. "You're not alone. Look at me." She found his eyes, and in them was the solid ground she had been missing. "What they're saying isn't about you, Hannah. It's about their own fear." "Fear of what?" "That you'll prove that dignity can't be bought or broken." When she got up, her stride was different. They went into Mr. Nestor's small pharmacy, a dry but fair man, straight as a ruler. He didn't make a face, didn't wrinkle his nose. He just sold her what she asked for and wished her a good afternoon. A simple thing, and for that very reason, a great one. "Good people still exist," Adam said as they left. "Yes," she replied, "and that gives me strength." On the way back, they passed in front of Colonel Hayes's mansion. A wooden window opened a crack, and his figure appeared, rigid, impeccable, with the cold look of someone who judged the world. "Having a nice walk, Adam? And bringing some fresh air to town?" he replied without changing his tone. "Be careful that wind doesn't turn into a hurricane," the colonel shot back, letting the window slam shut. Hannah walked on, her face her own again. Every closed door hurt, but every small gesture of respect stitched a new point of courage. On the corner, Ms. Rita, the seamstress, called out softly, "If you need anything, I'll bring my machine over to my house. We'll fix that dress, my girl." "I thank you so much," Hannah said, moved. "Gossip can't put thread on a needle, will she?" the seamstress concluded with a wink. When the two of them left the last street to take the dirt road again, the sky was already growing dim. Hannah clutched the packet of threads against her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that she could choose her own path, even if the road was long. Adam walked beside her, attentive, not a shadow, but a presence without being a prison. "Thank you for being on my side," she said. "I'm not on your side, Hannah," he said with a slight smile. "I'm with you." And so without a sound, the town taught them its harshest lesson, and without meaning to, it strengthened the very thing it feared most, the dignity of two hearts that were learning to beat in the same rhythm. The world can point a finger, but it can't measure the size of the truth when it decides to stand tall. Have you already subscribed to the channel to follow the next chapters of this story? The next few days settled in like pieces that finally find their right place. I saw when Adam's house began to have a different sound. No longer the dry snap of lonely wood planks, but quiet conversation, the clinking of plates, the scrape of a chair at coffee time. Hannah would wake up early, sit on the porch to catch the first sip of light, and from there she would watch the yard in a calm she had never allowed herself before. It wasn't happiness yet. It was a kind of peace that prepares the ground for a seed. Adam, for his part, learned to stay close without intruding. He would go down to the field, come back with his hands smelling of leaves, and before entering, he would clean his boots on the doorstep, as if asking permission of the house and the person who lived in it. One day he brought a bunch of basil. "My mother used to say good plants keep sadness away," he commented lightly. Hannah breathed in the scent, closing her eyes for a moment. "If it keeps sadness away," she said, "we'll put it on the windowsill to see if it catches the street too." She began to take care of what she could. She washed the calico curtain, mended the quilt, straightened the shrine, and with patience she embroidered a simple branch on the edges, as if stitching a design of hope. When she got tired, she would sit with the shawl on her shoulders and let time pass over her without guilt. Adam understood. He had learned that some pains aren't pushed away. They are passed through with small steps. "Do you know how to read, Hannah?" he asked one afternoon with the radio whispering a distant tune. "I learned a little," she said, "more from listening than from letters." Adam picked up an old almanac, opened it on the table, and pointed at the words with his finger. "Slowly, so we'll practice. Today is home." She smiled. "I already understand home. But now you'll write it. It's different when your own hand confirms what your heart wants." Letter by letter, Hannah wrote the word home, a little crooked but whole. And when she finished, she put the pencil down next to the paper, as if dropping a weight, and without realizing it, took a deeper breath. Adam didn't praise her out loud. He just carefully put the paper in a cookie tin, a small gesture that guaranteed permanence. At night, the two of them began to walk down to the creek to cool their feet. The sky over Harmony Creek seemed bigger when the afternoon faded, and the smell of damp earth held the world in a quiet stillness. Hannah would tell him stories from her childhood, the ones she could still tell. The games in the backyard, the first time she saw the ocean, a town festival where she danced until her legs ached, the taste of the sweet candy her aunt used to make. Adam would listen, not interrupting. Sometimes a short laugh would escape him, the kind that asks permission to be heard. "You don't laugh much, Adam," she teased, dipping her finger in the water. "I forgot how, a little," he confessed. "But I think I can remember." "Everything that belongs to us can come back," she said, looking at her reflection in the water. "Even a laugh knows the way home." In the yard, they planted a small patch of cilantro together and another of tiny flowers that the wind had brought on a stormy day. Hannah dug with a wooden spoon. He made space with his hoe, and each seedling got its own piece of ground. "If it takes, it'll grow," he said. "If it doesn't take," she replied, "we'll try again." In those days, the pendant with the monogram, the one Hannah had stored in the shrine, seemed to shine differently. Not from gold, but from memory. One afternoon, she took it out, polished it with a cloth, and rested it on her chest before putting it back. Adam saw, but kept quiet. He saved the question for the right time, because he understood that some answers come like a good rain. It does no good for them to arrive before they are ready. When the nights grew colder, Hannah would bring out her shawl and Adam would stoke the fire in the wood stove. He would tell her about the Dry Creek floods, the year he lost almost everything, the day his mother passed away after a fever that the local medicine couldn't reach. He didn't use sad words to embellish his suffering. He spoke simply, like someone pointing out a map. And at the end, he always left a thread of light. "What was left of me is what made me stand tall." Hannah would nod, as if she recognized the ground another traveler had walked on. Sometimes the town's malice would interfere with a buzz of gossip, a twisted message. It would come through a neighbor, a sideways glance at the store, a corner laugh on the street. Hannah would feel her body slump, and Adam, noticing, would invent some silly chore to pull her out of the bad wind. "Come see the moon from the oak tree," he would call. "From there, it's different. The moon is the same, but we are different when we change our place." Without grand promises, without oaths, the house took the shape of two. Two mugs appeared on the shelf. Two sets of laundry flapped in the wind on the line. Two pairs of sandals sat on the doorstep. And still, there was a clear respect, like a well-placed fence. No hurry, no step beyond what the heart could take without stumbling. "Adam," Hannah said one night, her voice almost a secret, "sometimes I dream that I'm falling." He leaned his back against the wall next to the bed and replied, "Then learn to dream that I'm reaching out my hand. One day, the dream will believe it." On Sunday, to an old radio tune, Adam awkwardly held out his hand. "Want to risk a couple of steps?" She laughed shyly. "I'm a bad dancer." "Me too," he said. "The advantage is we'll mess up together." They took two crooked steps, stumbled slightly, and stopped. They didn't need anything more. Sometimes it's in the almost that tenderness lives. In that time, Ranger, the horse, was still missed. On Adam's horizon, the road hurt in silence, but he didn't let the longing sour the house. He fixed an old saddle on a nail. He greased it as if preparing a future that might one day return. Hannah noticed but didn't comment. In return, she surprised him one afternoon with a new cloth on the saddle seat, embroidered with the same branch from the shrine. They didn't say anything. The gesture served as the word. And so, step by short step, they found a way to exist in one another without losing themselves. The closeness came as the first light does before a clear day, almost invisible, but certain. I'm telling you, there was love there. Maybe there already was, but the name wasn't needed yet. The care was enough. The world, however, does not forgive when two people are reborn without asking permission. And it was precisely when their hearts had learned to breathe in the same rhythm that life decided to demand one more test. the one that separates timid kindness from steel-hard courage. The night that would come after this brief peace would bring the weight of a promise and the shadows of men who refused to lose. The afternoon turned heavy, with clouds gathering behind the mountains and a smell of rain that made your skin tingle in silence. I was on the porch when Hannah appeared in the doorway, her shawl on her shoulders, her eyes deep as if she had been thinking for a long time. Adam was checking the padlock on the shed. Since that day in town, he had made a habit of checking the locks and hinges before dark, not out of fear, but with the prudence of a man who knows the world. "Adam," she called in a tone that asked for a conversation. "Yes, Hannah? Sometimes I think I won't make it. We try to move on, but it feels like the past is waiting for us at every crossroads." He didn't rush to answer. He leaned his hammer on the table, washed his hands in an aluminum basin, and came to sit on the doorstep, side by side with her. The rain began to streak the yard, first fine, then heavy, and the roof sang to the rhythm of the water. "The past doesn't own us forever," he said, looking at the darkening horizon. "We learn to get through it, even when it's screaming." Hannah tightened her shawl, and then she said, "But what if the past doesn't scream, but threatens?" She held out her hand and showed him a crumpled paper. It had been left tucked into the window earlier. "The one who challenges the town boss pays." No signature, no courage to own up to it. Adam read it once, folded the note, and put it in his pants pocket, as if he were saving a hot coal to put out later. "It's a coward's message," he said without raising his voice. "No one dictates what happens inside this house." "You say that like it's easy," she whispered. "But you're the one who took me from that block. You're the one who held my hand when no one else would." Adam breathed slowly, as if measuring his words so they wouldn't hurt. "I did what anyone should have done." "But no one did," she replied. And after a silence that weighed more than the storm, she finished, "If I'm ever in danger again, if the world comes against me like it did that day, I promise, I choose your house as my own. I choose your name next to mine. I'm staying forever." He turned his head, surprised. He wasn't a man to be intimidated, but that promise had a beautiful and serious weight, the kind that demands roots. "Don't promise me out of gratitude, Hannah. Gratitude is a wind. It cools you down, but it passes. A promise is solid ground." She held his gaze, her eyes as firm as they hadn't been in a long time. "It's not gratitude. It's the truth. I know what I'm saying." The rain intensified. On the wood stove, the kettle whistled, spreading the scent of ground coffee that reminded him of Sunday mornings. Adam got up, poured 2 mugs, and they drank in silence for a moment. Then she went to the shrine and took the dented monogram pendant, the one she had kept since the first day. "I want you to have this," she said, holding it out. "Until all this passes, it's the only thing I have left of what I lived through." "What if you miss it?" "What I miss is peace. This thing only pulls me back to what hurt me." He took it slowly, as if he were receiving a mission. He wrapped the pendant in a cloth and put it in the cookie tin, next to the paper where she had written home. The gesture sealed an agreement without shouting. A promise given, a promise kept. The next day, the sky broke into a blue that was painfully clear. Hannah asked to go to the simple cemetery in town. "I want to give a name to what they took away from me too quickly," she said in a low voice. They went early to avoid prying eyes. At the edge of the field of wooden crosses, Adam dug the earth with his hands, unhurriedly, and planted a small marker that he had carved himself the night before. Hannah took a scrap of white cloth from her pocket, embroidered with a small branch just like the one on the shrine. She wrote Benjamin with the same crooked but complete handwriting as home and tied it to the cross. She prayed softly. I saw her shoulders drop a little, as if the pain had found a place to rest. "Promise that if I get weak, you'll remind me that my son has a name?" she asked. "I promise," he replied, "and I'll also remind you that you have your own. Hannah isn't a disgrace, she's a road to walk." On the way back, they passed in front of Colonel Hayes's big house. The window opened a crack, and a cold eye watched without revealing itself completely. There were no words, just the squeak of a rusty screen door closing, as if someone was in a hurry to shut away their own power. Adam didn't slow his pace. Neither did Hannah. A person who has buried a piece of themselves learns not to back down from noise. At home, they shared a plate of black-eyed peas, cornbread, and a fried egg each. The simplicity of that lunch seemed more abundant than the banquets of powerful people because it was seasoned with respect. And it was there, between bites, that Adam broke through some of the stiffness he carried in his chest. If your promise is the ground, I promise the roof. As long as I breathe, no one will take you from here. Then we'll build it together, she said with a tired but strong smile. Ground and roof. The following hours passed gently, but the town didn't rest. At the gate, someone had scratched the word intruders with a piece of charcoal. Adam wiped it away with a wet cloth without a fuss. In the yard, an old neighbor left a sack of cornmeal and a crooked note for the new house. The world pushes, and the world helps you stand. It's always a fight, and it was in that fight that their promise, now spoken and kept, began to take root. I'm telling you, promises carry weight, not like a chain, but like an anchor. They hold you in the right place when the sea rises. Their promise, made in front of a name carved on a simple piece of wood, would pass through tests that had no place on that clear day, but it was already a promise of strength, a promise that wouldn't break with the first wind. In your opinion, does the young woman deserve justice? Leave it in the comments. Justice for Hannah. The calm didn't last long. It's like that in the country. When the wind changes and the sky is too open, you learn to be suspicious. I saw the signs arrive in silence, one a day, like I had ants carrying a grain of sugar. First, Mr. Fisher's store had no change for Adam. Then Mr. Osborne's market had no flour, right on market day. Finally, a notice from the county clerk's office, a yellow paper saying that the fence at Dry Creek Farm was 2 feet over the line into Colonel Hayes' property. 2 feet. A person who measures land like that doesn't want a boundary. They want to wear you down. They want us to get tired, Adam said, folding the paper carefully so as not to crumple his dignity with it. What if we just leave? Hannah asked, her voice heavy with caution. If we leave, it becomes a habit. Tomorrow they'll do it to someone else, and I haven't learned to live with my head down. On the same day, the conversation turned ugly in town. A notice appeared from Sheriff Blake, a man who drank coffee in the colonel's parlor and called him friend when he should have called him boss. The paper spoke of verification of origin, moral conduct, and vagrants, an old word used to hurt defenseless women. The sheriff arrived at the gate in the late afternoon, hat cocked, 2 deputies at his side. I was on the porch when I heard his boots scrape across the yard. Good afternoon, he said, as if the only good thing was the authority he carried. I'm here to conduct a verification. Adam didn't move off the step, but he gave a steady reply. Verify with respect. There are people here. The young woman needs to come to the station for clarification. Hannah took a deep breath. Adam put his body a step in front of her, not to hide her, but to shield her. She can clarify right here, Sheriff. What she went through isn't a crime. The crime is what they did to her. Sheriff Blake adjusted his belt, trying to add height to what he lacked in integrity. Order is order, law is law. Adam shot back, show me the warrant. The sheriff didn't show it. He showed impatience. Father Michael, who was walking back from the chapel, stopped at the gate and cleared his throat, as if asking permission for courage. Sheriff, you take the law into the law. Don't take a young woman from her home without a warrant. Sheriff Blake looked at the 3 of them. He didn't have a warrant. He had a plan. And a powerful man's plan doesn't like an audience. He left, letting the dust from the road rise up like a threat. That night, the yard smelled of smoke. You recognize it from a long way off. It's the smell that runs before the flame. Adam ran out and I went with him. At the edge of the pasture, a tongue of fire was climbing up the dry grass, fast as if someone had taught fire to run. Water, he shouted, throwing buckets on the ground, beating the flames with a wet sack. Hannah brought basins, soaked cloths, threw dirt with her hands. Neighbors Joe Ray and Ms. Rita arrived with a big tub, and the stubborn fire acted like it owned the place for a moment. Then, tired of its own vanity, it died down into the night. What was left was the pasture, blackened, and Adam's hands, burning, not from a bad wound, but from effort, and Hannah washing the burns with cold water, blowing on them, caring for them like someone praying. That wasn't the wind, Joe Ray said, kicking a piece of a wax fuse he found on the ground. That was a bad man's hand. Adam nodded without letting his rage turn to words. We'll replant it, Joe. The land knows how to start over. In the morning, the fence was cut, the beans stomped into the dirt. I saw the track of a big boot, a worn leather sole. Billy Ray and Zeke walked by laughing on the road, with the casual arrogance of men who never think they'll be held to account. "Nice pasture, Adam," Billy Ray shouted, his voice fake. "Too bad the fire likes green things so much." Adam wiped the sweat from his brow. "There are some things fire can't destroy." "Like what?" Zeke sneered. "Like a person's dignity. That's something the sun can't melt either." The tongues of the town that never sleeps started working day and night. They said Hannah had cursed the ground she walked on, that a woman who arrives like that brings damnation. But on the other side, good people were leaving food over the fence. A sack of cornmeal with a note from Mrs. Azalea, a piece of cheese from Mr. Nestor, a new lantern from Father Michael to light what the shadows tried to hide. The world has two sides, and they were facing each other at the gate of Dry Creek Farm. One afternoon with low clouds, a new henchman appeared in town. He didn't speak, he just watched. He leaned on the counter at the general store, asked for chewing tobacco, and when Hannah passed on the sidewalk, he didn't say a word. He just followed the empty space on her chest where the pendant had been with his eyes, as if he recognized what was missing. I understood right then that the silence of that man saw more than all the gossip. He had seen that monogram in another window, the window of a big house. "We have to hide the evidence," Adam said that night, lighting the lamp. "If they mess with the tin, they can't find it." He took the paper with home written on it, put it in a cloth envelope with the pendant, and buried it at the base of the big oak tree. "Tomorrow I'll make a bench over it. It will be shade and a secret." The letters from the county clerk continued. "Present documentation. Appear at the courthouse. Settle old debts." Debts. Adam never owed more than his own strength, and he paid that every day with his calloused hands. The colonel wanted paper to suffocate them where his hands couldn't squeeze. "I'll go," Adam said firmly, in the way of a man who knows how to go into and out of difficult rooms. "I'll go with you," Hannah replied. "You stay," he asked, "not with authority, but with care. In there they hurt you with words. I'll come back and tell you about it." On the appointed morning, Adam walked alone into the small courthouse with its whitewashed walls and high windows. On the other side of the counter, the clerk's pen moved with the slowness of a snake. Colonel Hayes appeared later, smelling of expensive leather, his beard trimmed, with a smile that greeted and judged in the same breath. "I came to help resolve things," the colonel said, spreading his arms. "The one who helps doesn't tie knots," Adam replied. There was an exchange of papers, an exchange of looks, an exchange of small violences dressed up as formality. Adam left with his head held high and brought home the certainty of what they already knew. They wouldn't stop. That night, thunder rumbled in the distance. The sky over Harmony Creek gathered in a dark mass. The air grew heavy. The smell of rain clung to the rooftops. Hannah felt shivers that weren't from the cold. "It's going to storm," she said, watching a flash of lightning. "And we're going to have company," Adam replied, checking the shed latch again. "The kind of company that doesn't knock." He leaned the hoe against the back of the door, not as a weapon, but as an extension of the arms of a man who plants and also knows how to defend his home. He put out the lamp early so the house wouldn't call to eyes from the road. Hannah hid a small pocket knife in the hem of her dress, not to hurt anyone, but to cut a rope if they needed to. A woman who has suffered learns to prepare a path for escape and for return. "If they come," she said, straightening the shrine, "I'll be by your side. If they come," he said, "we'll stand tall, and if we can't, we'll remember. A promise is an anchor." The first heavy drop of rain hit the roof like a forceful hand. The wind whistled through the cracks, and the darkness filled with the sound of falling water. Outside, far and near, the world was breathing heavily. Inside the house, I heard their hearts beat in rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, with the rhythm of courage. In the yard, the neighbors' dogs began to bark in the same direction, like church bells sounding an alarm. And it was in the interval between one thunderclap and the next that I heard it. Not the wind, not the rain, but boots. 3, 4, 5 marked footsteps, unhurried, of men who believe that night keeps secrets. The threat that had been small was finally showing its face. What happened on that night, I'll tell you in the next chapter because that's where life demands from Adam and Hannah not just kindness, but the stamina and courage to get through the eye of the storm together. The rain would be a witness, and the town the next day would have a lot to talk about. The pre-dawn hours fell heavy, with thunder rumbling deep and the rain lashing the yard like a whip. I had warned you, there's going to be company that doesn't knock. And it didn't take long for the footsteps to arrive. First 4, then 6, steady, unhurried, like men who believe fear opens doors. Adam put out the lamp and leaned against the locked door. Hannah was an arm's length from him, her hand firm on the wall. Their hearts were beating in the same rhythm, not of terror, but of readiness. "Adam from Dry Creek Farm!" Billy Ray's voice came from outside, thick and slurred. "Open this door, we just want to talk." "Good talk happens in the daylight," Adam answered without shouting. "Come back when the sun's up." "The law's in charge by day. At night, it's the men with muscle," a voice said. The door groaned with the first kick. Adam looked around, measuring the space like he was measuring a ball field. He leaned the heavy table against the door, then the chest of drawers, creating a simple barricade. He grabbed the hoe that was leaning nearby, not as a weapon, but as an extension of a farmer's hands. Hannah, in silence, ran to the room, put on a thick coat over her dress, and brought the big water basin closer. "If they get in, we can douse the fire and light up the darkness," she said, looking at the lamp. "You'll stay behind me." "I'll stay with you." The window rattled with a blow from outside. A piece of glass cracked in the corner. Zeke's shadow appeared, outlined by lightning, his hat dripping, a piece of wood in his hand. "Last warning," he shouted. "Last warning from me, too," Adam shot back. "There are people here." The thunder drowned out the next attack. The door gave way a foot. The lock held. The table slid back 2 inches. Hannah, quick, put the water basin between the door and the chest, blocking the movement. The next blow hit the makeshift barricade and lost its power. Billy Ray swore loudly. "Open up, you fool! Learn to beg." "A coward is the one who comes in a group to a single house," Adam said firmly, still holding the door. The neighbors' dogs began to bark in the same direction. On the dirt road, lanterns flickered like big fireflies. Joe Ray was running with a thin stick. Ms. Rita brought a whistle and a sheet to use as a bandage if anyone got hurt. And 2 more neighbors appeared with lanterns. The muddy road got eyes, and when the night gets eyes, cowardice forgets its way. "What's this business at the boys' house?" Joe Ray yelled. "There are witnesses here." The silent man backed up a full step. Billy Ray and Zeke, seeing them arrive, swallowed the rest of their bravado. "This ain't over," Zeke snarled. "Then it'll end at the police station," Joe Ray retorted, raising his lantern. "Want us to come with you?" They didn't. They retreated through the mud, slipping and swearing under their breath. The silent man was the last to leave. He took 2 steps back, almost holding his breath, and then turned his face to Hannah, illuminated by the lamp. In his eyes, there was a recognition that didn't belong in that night. In his hurried movement, a dark fabric slipped from his pocket and landed in a puddle, a fine silk handkerchief with a monogram embroidered on the corner. The letters were revealed in a flash of lightning. LP, Hannah saw it. Her body went cold as if the rain had gotten inside. Adam saw it too, but he didn't understand right away. Miss Rita picked up the handkerchief and handed it to Hannah. "It fell. It's proof if you need it." Hannah ran her finger over the embroidery slowly, as if stroking the face of a ghost. The thunder took a long time to die down. The neighbors stayed for a while, helped prop up the door, dry the floor, and put the table back in place. Father Michael arrived out of breath, carrying a small wooden saint. No one asked why. "Sometimes you just need something to watch over you." "You're not alone," he said, placing the saint in the shrine. "The night passes. It always passes." When the yard only held the sound of the rain, Adam and Hannah sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, sharing the same blanket. Their breathing returned to normal. In Hannah's lap, the handkerchief with the letters LP seemed to glow from within, even with the lamp out. "I know that design," she said in a whisper that held only 2 words. "From where?" Hannah swallowed hard. Her eyes got lost for a moment, as if she were going back into a dark hallway, but this time lighting a match. "From the big house in town, from the man who—" She stopped, bit her lip, and took a breath. I'll tell you properly tomorrow. Adam didn't press for an answer. He just covered her hand with his. Outside, the storm decided to calm down. Inside, something heavy and certain was moving, taking the place that fear had left empty. What that monogram would reveal was only for the next day, and it's in the light of that truth that our story will twist completely, to show that the courage of that night wasn't just a defense. It was the key to unlocking an old door, locked by powerful men. The dawn came without a rush, as if the heavy night was still determined to linger in the corners of the house. Hannah woke up to the gentle sound of water running from the eaves, and for a moment she thought the storm was just a bad dream. But the silk handkerchief, damp and dark, was there on the table, and the embroidered letters LP shone in the ray of sun coming through the crack. Adam poured coffee into 2 mugs and sat across from her without saying anything. Sometimes it's in silence that the truth finds its way. I know that monogram, Hannah said, her voice coming from a distant place. It's Gideon Hayes. Adam held the mug mid-air. Are you sure? I am, she said. I saw those letters in the big house, on handkerchiefs, on the initialed shirts, on the silver. She ran her finger over the embroidery like a person carefully opening an old wound. It was him. He was the one who promised to marry me. He was the one who left me alone. The words didn't need to be complete. The house understood. Adam lowered the mug, rested his elbows on the table, and let the air out slowly like a person controlling a fire to keep the flame. So it's him. He's the one who's been harassing me with papers and henchmen. It's him, Hannah confirmed, her voice firm. And he's the one who made me a commodity in the square to hide his own shame. There was a brief moment of breath, and Hannah continued, as if forcing herself to finish the journey. Months ago, when I was still living with my parents, the colonel started showing up at the market. So polite. He said I was different, that I deserved an education, a future. One day he sent a message for me to go to the big house to talk about work for my family. I went to the gate. He gave me a pendant with those very letters. She touched her own chest by reflex. You can imagine the rest. When they found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared. Then came the messages, the threats, and then the auction. Adam nodded, hard on the inside, calm on the outside. We're going to bring this story out of the dark, Hannah, but not with shouting, with proof. They went together to the big oak tree in the yard. Adam dug into the damp earth at the foot of the bench he had made and unearthed the small cloth bag where he had kept the 2 most important things from that start of a new life. The paper with the word home, written by Hannah, and the dented pendant with the monogram. He cleaned the pendant with the hem of his shirt and placed it next to the handkerchief. The identical letters stared at each other as if recognizing themselves in a mirror. This isn't just a piece of cloth, he said, looking at the 2 objects. It's a word written in metal and thread. It's the signature of a man who thinks he owns the world. And now it's going to be the signature of what he did, Hannah finished, without a tremor. They decided to take the items to Ms. Rita, the seamstress. If there was anyone in that town who understood embroidered letters, it was her. They found the woman adjusting the machine in the corner of her room, a dust cloth still in her lap. Come in, my dears. Why do you both look like you didn't sleep a wink? Adam held out the handkerchief. Hannah held out the pendant. Can you tell us who these letters belong to, ma'am? Ms. Rita didn't even have to get too close. The eyes of a woman who had been stitching all her life went straight to the details that an ordinary person doesn't see. It's a satin stitch with a stem outline, letters designed for L and P. I've embroidered those initials many times myself. For whom? Hannah asked, her heart telling her she already knew the answer. For Colonel Gideon Hayes, handkerchiefs, shirts, even dinner napkins. The seamstress put a hand on Hannah's shoulder in a caress that squeezed without hurting. Daughter, if you came here for courage, you already have it. If you came here for a witness, I am one. They left with the handkerchief, the pendant, the seamstress's word, and the weight of a certainty that now had a name. Father Michael was waiting at the chapel door as if he sensed the next storm coming. Father, we need the bell, Adam said directly. The bell has an owner, the priest replied, opening the gate. The people. The bell rang once, twice, 3 times, and the sound ran over the rooftops like water on new shingles. The town square filled up. Mrs. Azalea, Mr. Nestor, Joe Ray, Mr. Fisher, looking ashamed. Curious people, moved people, people who doubted out of habit. Hannah went up the 2 steps of the chapel. It wasn't an auction block, it was a real altar. Adam stood next to her, not in front. He was with her, not above her. I came to say my name, Hannah began, her voice firm. My name is Hannah, and I am not what they said I was. The murmur stopped. She held up the pendant. I got this from Colonel Hayes when he promised me something he never kept. She held up the handkerchief. And this fell out of one of his men's pockets at my door last night. The letters are the same. The story is the same. Ms. Rita took a step and spoke loudly for everyone to hear. I can confirm the embroidery is the Colonel's. I embroidered it with these hands many times. Zans. Mrs. Azalea held up her rosary. It's a great sin to use power to hurt a woman. Mr. Nestor finished, dry as a ruler. The one who owns the letters must answer for the words. The street opened up. The gate of the big house creaked open, and Colonel Gideon Hayes appeared, immaculate, his face a little pale. He walked with the confidence of a man who had never been called out in a public square. What is all this fuss? He asked with the smile he used to cut without raising his voice. Adam didn't answer. The word belonged to Hannah. Colonel, she said, looking straight into his eyes, I didn't come to ask for anything. I came to tell the truth. The child I lost was yours, and what you did to me wasn't just a sin, it was a crime against my dignity. A buzz began, but Father Michael raised his hand and the silence obeyed. Hannah showed the pendant and the handkerchief, and the sound of the bell, still vibrating in the tower, seemed to mark every syllable. No one will believe you, the Colonel shot back, in almost the same polite tone but with poison dripping out. A girl's word against mine. Ms. Rita stepped forward. It's not just her word, it's mine too. Those letters are my work. Joe Ray raised his chin. Last night your men went to Adam's house. I'm here to testify. To the side, the silent man, the same one who had dropped the handkerchief, was in the crowd, his hat low, his body tense. For a second, indecision passed through his eyes like a fast cloud, and then he took off his hat. Colonel? His voice came out harsh with dust. I was there. I was following orders. Shut up, the Colonel hissed without looking at him. I was following your orders, the man repeated, now firm. Not to talk, but to scare them. I have a sister, Colonel. I can't carry this burden ammonia anymore. The sound that followed wasn't a market sound. It was the sound of people waking up. Mr. Fisher lowered his eyes, ashamed of yesterday. Ms. Azalea squeezed her rosary like she was holding a daughter's hand. Father Michael took a step forward, his prayer book closed against his chest like a shield. The truth has come to the square, the priest said, and the truth demands to be set right. Sheriff Blake appeared late and disheveled on purpose, trying to put on an air of authority in the middle of the people. What is this, an unlicensed meeting? Adam put his body a half step in front of Hannah, not to steal the scene, but to be a wall. It's people asking for the law. You have a pen? Write this down. You have ears? Listen. The sheriff looked to the Colonel for support and didn't find his usual confidence. The shadow of the big house seemed smaller in that moment. Courage, when it takes hold, changes the dimensions of a town. Hannah took a deep breath. Her voice now had the peace of a person who had completed a duty. I am not a commodity. I am a person. And all I wanted was to be able to mourn my son with the name I gave him. Benjamin. The rest is between you and God. The last words fell softly and heavily, like a good rain on cracked earth. Adam held out his hand and Hannah took it, not hiding from anyone. It was a simple and enormous gesture. There was no shame there, only a way forward. Some eyes filled with tears, not of scandal, but of recognition. The entire town, for a second, saw itself in that young woman who just wanted the right to exist. I won't run, she said softly to Adam, alone. Neither will I, he replied. If they want to take us, they'll have to take us together. The bell rang on its own with the wind, as if blessing the scene. The Colonel, pale, calculated the distance to his own door and chose silence over a lie that no one would believe anymore. The sheriff, without a shadow to hide in, swallowed hard and scribbled something that no one would read. but that everyone would demand he be held accountable for. The square, little by little, learned to breathe again. As the sun rose a little higher, Hannah rested the pendant on the handkerchief and put both in the pocket of her dress. They were no longer memories that held her captive. They were proof that freed her. And next to Adam, she came down from the chapel steps like a person stepping onto the beginning of a clean road, still long, still full of obstacles, but finally with the right name on the marker at its side. What came next? Justice, restitution, the Colonel's fate. That's the kind of thing life demands to the end once it starts. And it's that ending, so beautiful it will bring tears to your eyes, that I'll tell you about in the next chapter. Because some stories, when they reach a certain point, ask us to take a breath before we tie the final knot, the one that closes a wound without erasing the scar. They were days that were both short and long at the same time. The town square still remembered the sound of the bell, and Hannah's courage had become the topic of conversation around every wood stove. But the truth, when it begins to be born, doesn't accept half-light. The next afternoon, the silent henchman appeared at the gate with his hat crushed in his hands. He gave his name, Matt, and without mincing words, he spoke what he had kept in his heart. The baby, he didn't die. The colonel ordered the midwife to take him to the hospital in Charleston to make the story disappear. I was the one who delivered the package with the handkerchief. Forgive me. The house fell silent. I felt the ground move beneath my feet. Not from fear, but from hope. Hannah clutched the door frame to keep from falling. Adam held her waist with the same care you'd use for an antique clay vase, firm but not squeezing. The truth has arrived, Hannah, he said, looking into her eyes. Let's go find our destiny. The next morning they left in a borrowed wagon from Joe Ray. The road to Charleston seemed longer than any map could show. Each bend held a prayer. Father Michael went with them, with his prayer book and the quiet company of a friend. Miss Rita tied a small ribbon in Hannah's hair to remind her that even a wounded woman can adorn her own victory. The hospital was a white, tall building, smelling of antiseptic and strong soap. An elderly nun, Sister Clarice, brought out a book of records. The pages rustled like wings. Adam placed the pendant with LP on the table. Hannah showed her the identical handkerchief. The nun adjusted her glasses, read, went back, read again. Then she pointed to a line with a thin finger. Newborn, left in the middle of the night with a marked handkerchief. LP, he's here, she said with a quiet kindness. The world fit into a single breath. Hannah cried the way a person cries who finds a name after so much loss. Not a cry that brings you down, but a cry that lifts you up. Adam squeezed her shoulders, his own eyes tear-filled, and I understood. It was the rain inside, washing the ground for the harvest. From the next room, a brief, thin sound came. I'm not going to embellish it with details. A child's life is something you guard in the background, like a jewel covered to keep from getting scratched. Hannah only rested her forehead on that small life and whispered the name she had already embroidered in her heart. Benjamin. The nuns asked questions. The priest offered to be a witness. Ms. Rita confirmed the embroidery. Matt signed his own confession, so it would lead to restitution. Sheriff Blake, now with no one's shadow to hide in, couldn't stop the legal process. The town spoke louder. Colonel Hayes lost what he believed was infinite, the certainty of giving orders without being held accountable. And the law, still slow as an ox on a hill, began step by step to reach the big house. The return trip was a different road. In the wagon, Hannah held her shawl tightly to her chest. Adam drove the reins with a care that seemed like a prayer. At Dry Creek Farm, the neighbors opened the gate as if they were starting a festival. Mrs. Azalea brought sweet bread, Mr. Nestor a sack of salt, Joe Ray a wooden cradle that smelled of fresh wood. Father Michael held the simple saint in the air and gave a short, beautiful blessing, the kind that doesn't need to be in Latin to touch what matters. That evening, they planted a new oak tree in the yard together. Adam dug, Hannah held the seedling, and I saw him take the paper with the word home from the tin and tuck it, folded, at the base of the root, not to hide the past, but so that a good shade would grow from it. The pendant with the colonel's letters was hung in the shrine, not as a memory of pain, but as proof that they had won. Metal that once tried to weigh them down was now nothing more than a piece of metal in the face of the whole truth. You saved me when no one else would, Hannah said, her voice soft. I promised, and I'll say it again. I choose your name next to mine. Adam took a deep breath, his courage turning into tenderness. Then stay, he replied. May our home finish healing you. The priest performed a simple wedding on the porch that smelled of coffee and worn-out dishes. There was no embroidered dress, no grand words. There was no band music, but the wind in the new oak tree made a sound that if you close your eyes, you can still hear faintly. And on that night, the town, even those who wouldn't admit it, understood that the love of good people doesn't need to ask permission to exist. Time passed like the waters of the creek, without a shout, but carrying away the stones. And in Adam's yard, 3 shadows began to stretch in the sunset, 2 large ones, and 1 small one always behind them, as if life had finally learned the gesture of not hurting. In the shrine, the candle burned low, warming the word home and illuminating what the pain had never been able to erase.